Have you ever met someone who changed your life? Someone who appeared out of nowhere and disappeared before you could even ask why? In the quiet town of Everson, Christmas lights glow across empty streets, and a lonely cafe called Winter Lights stays open through the coldest nights. There, a woman named Clara, still grieving the loss of her grandmother, spends her days serving coffee to strangers. Until one snowy night, a mysterious man walks in. He says little. His eyes hide too much. But when he leaves, Clara finds a photograph beneath his cup, an old picture of her cafe, taken long before she was born. On the back it says, "If you ever lose faith in Christmas, find me under the lights." That single message pulls her into a story of fate, danger, and love. A love that might save her. Or destroy her. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts. A place where love finds its way through the quietest corners of the soul. Tonight, we bring you a story of faith, redemption, and a Christmas that changed everything. So sit back, relax, and listen to Under the Christmas Lights. Snow had begun to fall long before sunset, soft as breath and slow as a lullaby. By night, the small town of Everson shimmered beneath 1,000 golden lights. Windows glowed with wreaths and ribbons. Laughter echoed faintly from distant streets. And from the square came the gentle hum of silent night, floating through the cold like a dream half-remembered. On the corner of Maple Street, a small cafe flickered with warmth. Its wooden sign, slightly worn, read Winter Lights. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and roasted almonds, wrapping the room in a quiet comfort that almost felt like home. Clara moved slowly behind the counter, cleaning the last cup of the night. Her movements were soft, practiced, and weary. Since her grandmother's passing a year ago, the cafe had been her only companion. The laughter, the warmth, even the Christmas spirit she once adored, all of it had faded with that loss. She used to believe in Christmas miracles. Now, the holiday felt like a cruel reminder. Bright lights for everyone, except her. Clara placed the cup on the rack, wiped her hands on her apron, and gazed out the frosted window. Snowflakes fell thick and slow, swirling like feathers caught in the wind. The town looked perfect, too perfect, and in that perfection, she felt utterly alone. Then, the bell above the door chimed. Clara turned. A man stepped inside, bringing with him a gust of wind and a scatter of snowflakes that melted onto the wooden floor. He was tall, wrapped in a dark wool coat, the collar turned up against the cold. His presence was calm, deliberate, the kind that filled a room without trying. He approached the counter. "Black coffee," he said, his voice low, slightly rough, as if unused to speaking much. "No sugar." Clara nodded, instinctively studying him. His eyes caught her attention first. Gray, steady, but distant. They carried a weight she couldn't name. When she returned with his drink, he had chosen the table by the window. He sat in silence, watching the snow outside, his hands wrapped loosely around the cup, but never bringing it to his lips. For a moment, the cafe felt suspended in time. The clock ticked softly. The music from outside faded into the hum of the heater. Clara stood behind the counter, unsure why her heart beat a little faster. Something about the man, his stillness, his silence, drew her in. She told herself not to stare. Yet when he finally looked up, their eyes met. It was only a second, but long enough for her to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Awareness. Then, just as quietly, he looked away. When Silent Night reached its final notes, he stood, slipped on his gloves, and set a few bills on the table, twice the price of his drink. Clara opened her mouth to thank him, but the words never came. The man gave a slight nod, turned toward the door, and disappeared into the falling snow. For a while, she stayed still, listening to the faint echo of the doorbell. The cafe felt emptier now, colder somehow. She sighed, gathered her courage, and walked over to clear the table. That was when she saw it. Under the cup, half hidden beneath a napkin, lay a photograph, old, yellowed, its edges slightly curled. Clara picked it up carefully. It was a picture of Winter Lights, her cafe. But not as it was now. The furniture looked older, the lights dimmer. And standing in front of the window was a smiling woman in a wool coat and red scarf. Her grandmother. Clara froze. Her breath caught in her throat as she flipped the photo over. On the back, written in neat, slanted handwriting, were the words, "If you ever lose faith in Christmas, find me under the lights." For a long moment she couldn't move. The clock ticked louder, the heater hummed, and outside, snow kept falling, soft and endless. She looked toward the window, her reflection barely visible in the frosted glass. Beyond it, the Christmas lights flickered once, faint, as if winking at her, and in that fragile stillness, a voice seemed to whisper inside her heart. That night, she didn't know. The stranger would change her Christmas forever, the girl who no longer believed in miracles. The snow never stopped. By the next morning, the streets of Everson glowed under a thick white blanket. The town was alive with laughter, music, and the smell of roasted chestnuts from vendors near the square. Yet inside Winter Lights, the world felt slower, quieter, like time refused to move at the same pace as everyone else's. Clara wiped down the counter again, even though it was already spotless. Since that strange night, her mind had replayed the same image over and over. The photograph, the message, the man with gray eyes who disappeared into the snow. But life didn't stop for mysteries. People still came in, ordered lattes with cinnamon, complained about shopping lines, or laughed about their holiday plans. Clara smiled when they smiled, nodded at their stories, and pretended the warmth around her was enough to melt the cold inside. Across the counter, Mia, her best friend and part-time waitress, hummed along to a Christmas song playing on the radio. She was the kind of girl who believed every snowflake carried a wish, and that love always found a way. The opposite of Clara in every possible sense. "You're daydreaming again," Mia teased, nudging her gently. "Don't tell me you're thinking about him." Clara blinked. "Who? That mysterious guy from last night? Don't even try to deny it. I can read it all over your face." Clara laughed softly, shaking her head. "He was just a customer." "Uh-huh," Mia smirked, leaning closer. "And I'm Santa Claus." Clara rolled her eyes, but her cheeks warmed anyway. "He left behind an old photo of this cafe. My grandmother was in it." Mia paused mid-motion. "Wait, seriously? That's actually kind of spooky." "It's probably just a coincidence," Clara said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe he found it somewhere and didn't realize what it was." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe fate's trying to tell you something. You've been avoiding Christmas spirit for too long. Maybe it's time you let a little magic in again." "Magic doesn't pay the bills," Clara murmured. "Neither does loneliness." Mia's reply hit deeper than it should have. Clara said nothing, simply turned back to her work as the bell above the door jingled and another rush of customers poured in. Hours later, when the last cup had been washed and the cafe closed for the night, Clara stepped outside into the quiet snowfall. The town lights twinkled along the rooftops like constellations brought down to earth. Her apartment was only a few blocks away, small, old, but cozy in its own imperfect way. She kicked off her boots, turned on the dim lamp near the window, and looked around. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, still bare. She had taken it out days ago, but never bothered to decorate it. It just didn't feel right. On the table sat the photograph she had found, the one with her grandmother's smile frozen in another lifetime. Clara picked it up, tracing her fingers along the faded edges. She wondered if her grandmother had known him, the man from last night, or if the message on the back had been meant for her all along. Outside, the wind howled softly, brushing against the glass. And then, she saw him. Lucas. He was standing across the street near the cafe entrance, staring up at the Winter Lights sign glowing above the door. Snow gathered on his coat, but he didn't seem to care. He just stood there, still, distant, like a ghost caught between time and memory. Clara's heart skipped. She hesitated, watching from behind the window pane. Something about the way he looked, the heaviness in his shoulders, the loneliness in his stance, made her chest tighten. Finally, she grabbed her coat and stepped outside. The air bit at her skin, sharp and cold. She crossed the street, boots crunching on fresh snow. "Lucas?" she called softly. He turned, startled, as if waking from a dream. "You remembered my name?" Clara frowned. "You never told me." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Maybe some things don't need to be said to be remembered. She didn't know how to respond. For a long moment, they just stood there in the falling snow, the world around them silent except for the whisper of the wind. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked. He looked at the cafe, then back at her. His voice was low, filled with something fragile. Regret, maybe. "I used to come here," he said. "A long time ago, when I still believed in good things." His words lingered in the air as soft as snowflakes, as heavy as truth. Clara followed his gaze to the window, to the glow of the light spilling across the tables inside, the reflection of her grandmother's photo still sitting there. "You knew her, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Lucas didn't answer. Instead, he looked up at the sky, where snow kept falling. Endless, relentless, beautiful. "Some places remember us better than people do," he murmured. "This one remembers too much." For a heartbeat, their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them, an ache, a pull, a fragile recognition. Then Lucas turned away, his breath misting in the cold. "You should go inside. Clara, it's freezing." She wanted to stop him, to ask what he meant, but the words caught in her throat. By the time she found her voice, he was already gone, swallowed once more by the snow. Clara stood there for a while, staring into the empty street. The sign above winter lights flickered softly, casting ripples of light over her face. And somewhere deep inside her, a question began to bloom. Was he real? Or just the echo of a miracle she'd stopped believing in? The next morning, the first sunlight in days touched the snow-covered roofs of Everson. The world outside winter lights looked almost unreal, a town frozen inside a snow globe. Clara unlocked the cafe door, her breath forming soft clouds in the cold. The memory of last night, Lucas's voice, his eyes, that lingering question, still echoed in her chest. She flipped the sign to open and began her routine. Grind the beans, heat the milk, wipe the counter. The cafe smelled like cinnamon again, warm and comforting. But under that sweetness was a quiet anticipation she couldn't shake. Then the bell above the door chimed. Her hand froze mid-motion. Lucas stood there, snow melting on his shoulders, his expression calmer than she remembered. He smiled, faintly, almost shyly. "I think I still owe you for that coffee," he said. Clara blinked, surprised, then managed a small smile of her own. "You already paid double." "Then maybe this one's for the trouble I caused." He placed a few coins on the counter, though she didn't reach for them. "So," she said lightly, "you're a man who settles debts quickly." "Not always," he replied, eyes drifting toward the window. "But lately, I've learned some things shouldn't be left unfinished." The way he said it, quiet, heavy, made Clara want to ask more, but something in his tone warned her not to. Instead, she poured him another cup of coffee, the steam curling between them like fragile threads of warmth. For a while, neither spoke. Outside, the morning crowd passed by, people carrying gifts, laughter trailing behind them. Inside, time felt suspended again, just like that first night. Then, without looking up, Lucas said, "I used to work for the city, the lighting department." Clara blinked. "Lighting, you mean?" "The decorations?" He nodded. "I designed the Christmas lights. The ones strung across Main Street, the star on top of City Hall, even the pattern on this cafe's sign. Every December, the whole town would shine. It used to make me proud. What happened?" He hesitated. His fingers tapped lightly against the cup. "A mistake. A bad decision. Someone I trusted took everything and left my name behind to carry the blame." Clara's chest tightened. That's why you left? Everson didn't leave much choice, he said with a small, tired smile. I thought if I disappeared, maybe people would forget. But places? He looked up, meeting her gaze. Places remember you, even when you don't want them to. She wanted to ask what kind of mistake, what he'd lost. But the rawness in his eyes kept her silent. Instead, she offered softly, You came back anyway. Maybe I was hoping to see the lights again, he said. To see if they still worked. Before Clara could respond, the doorbell chimed again. This time louder, urgent. 2 men entered, dressed in dark coats, their eyes sharp and searching. They scanned the cafe quickly, ignoring Clara's polite greeting. One of them asked, You seen a man come through here? Tall black coat, gray eyes? Clara's heartbeat quickened. Without thinking, she glanced at Lucas, only to find him already gone from sight, crouched behind the counter's lower shelf. She turned back to the strangers, masking her panic with a calm smile. Sorry, just me here. You might check the square. Lots of travelers this week. The men exchanged a look, then nodded curtly and stepped back outside. The door shut with a thud, leaving only the sound of Clara's pulse in her ears. After a moment, Lucas straightened slowly from behind the counter, brushing a bit of dust from his sleeve. His tone was quiet but sincere. You didn't have to do that, she exhaled, half laughing to steady herself. You looked like you needed it. He smiled for real this time, a small, grateful curve of the lips that made him seem younger. Thank you, he said. You might have just saved me once. Clara crossed her arms, trying to hide the way her hands still trembled. Then maybe you can repay me properly. His brow lifted. How? Next time, she said, her voice softer now. Buy me a cup of cocoa. Fair trade. Lucas chuckled under his breath, the sound low and warm. Deal. The tension in the room eased. Clara made the cocoa herself, the rich scent filling the air. She slid the mug across the counter toward him, steam rising like a pale ribbon between them. For the first time, he didn't hide behind his silence. Their eyes met, steady, unhurried, and something unspoken passed between them. Outside, snow drifted past the windows. The world was still cold, still uncertain. But inside winter lights, for that single moment, the air felt warmer, alive. Lucas took a sip and smiled faintly. Still the best place in Everson, he murmured. Clara laughed softly, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. That's because you helped design it, didn't you? He didn't answer, just looked at her, eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lights above. And there, in that fleeting silence, the distance between them began to melt, like snow under the touch of sunlight. Lights and smiles. The snow kept falling over Everson, but inside winter lights, warmth had found its way back, quietly, like sunlight slipping through old curtains. Since that morning, Lucas had become a familiar presence. Sometimes he arrived early, helping Clara set up before customers came in. Other times he stayed after closing, fixing things she hadn't realized were broken. He had a gift for light, not just in wiring or bulbs, but in how he noticed the world. One evening, as they stood near the cafe window, he watched the flickering string of lights above the door and said, "That one's dying." Clara frowned. "It's been like that for weeks. I couldn't fix it." Lucas only smiled. "Then we'll fix it together." He climbed the small ladder, tools in hand, while Clara steadied the base. The air smelled of pine and roasted coffee, and for the first time in a long while, she laughed. A soft, surprised laugh that made Lucas glance down and grin. "Careful," she teased. "If you fall, I'm not catching you." "Then I'll try not to," he replied, his voice light, almost playful. When the final bulb flickered back to life, warm, golden light spilled across the window pane. Lucas stepped down, brushing dust from his hands. "See? Sometimes all you need is a little patience and a steady hand." Clara smiled, her gaze lingering longer than it should. "You make it sound simple." He looked at her. Really looked. And for a moment, Neither of them spoke. The next afternoon, snow clouds gathered again, but the streets were alive with music and laughter. Clara locked the cafe early, and when she turned around, Lucas was waiting outside with 2 cups of cocoa. "Come on," he said, handing her one. "You've been trapped in that cafe for too long. Let's see what Everson looks like when it's alive." They wandered through the Christmas market, rows of stalls glowing under strings of colored lights. The smell of caramel, pine, and roasted nuts filled the air. Children ran past them, clutching candy canes and small presents wrapped in gold paper. Clara hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd smiled like this. Lucas watched her as she laughed at a child trying to juggle snowballs. He didn't say anything, just smiled quietly, as if seeing her happy was enough. They stopped by a stall selling handmade ornaments. Lucas picked up a small glass sphere, transparent with a swirl of light inside. "It's called a starlight glass," he explained. "You heat it, blow through the tube, and the colors inside take shape on their own. Want to learn?" "Now?" he chuckled. "Why not? I know a place with a furnace." Later that night, inside an old workshop at the edge of town, Lucas showed her how to hold the glass rod, how to spin it gently above the flame, how to breathe just enough to form a shape. Clara was nervous at first, afraid she'd shatter it. "It's too fragile," she whispered. "So are most beautiful things," he said softly. "That's what makes them worth holding carefully." When she finally managed to form her first small glowing orb, her face lit up, literally, as the molten light reflected in her eyes. Lucas smiled. "You're a natural. Or maybe I had a good teacher." He looked away, his expression unreadable. "You should keep that one. First lights are lucky." 2 days before Christmas, the town's tree lighting ceremony filled the square. Lucas and Clara joined the crowd, hands full of small gifts for the orphanage children. They handed out toys and candy, took photos under the giant tree, and for a fleeting moment, Clara forgot the weight of the past year. When someone offered to take their picture, she hesitated, then smiled and nodded. The flash went off. Lucas blinked, slightly startled, then laughed. It was the first time she'd heard that sound from him. Deep, warm, real. The photo captured it all. The tree behind them glowing, snow falling gently, and the faintest trace of something unspoken between their smiles. That evening, Lucas led her to the frozen pond behind the square. "Have you ever skated?" he asked. "Once. I fell 6 times. Then I'll make sure it's only 5 tonight." The ice gleamed under lantern light. Clara stepped hesitantly, wobbling with her first push. Lucas caught her hand before she could fall, his grip firm but gentle. "Relax," he said, guiding her slowly. "Let the ice move with you." "I'm trying," she laughed breathlessly. "Don't try. Trust." She looked up, and their eyes met. The world blurred around them, music, laughter, snow, all fading until there was only that single heartbeat of stillness. Then her foot slipped again, and he pulled her close, steadying her against his chest. For a moment they didn't move. "See?" Lucas whispered near her ear. "I told you I'd catch you." Clara's cheeks flushed, her breath visible between them. "You sound too sure of yourself." "Only about this." He let her go slowly, his hand brushing hers as she found her balance again. The rest of the evening passed in laughter and small victories, and when the fireworks began above the square, they stood side by side, heads tilted to the same sky. The night ended where it began, beneath the same lights Lucas once designed. They glowed brighter than ever, reflecting in the snow like 1,000 tiny stars. Clara turned to him. "You made these, didn't you?" He nodded. "Every wire, every bulb. I wanted them to feel alive." "They do." He smiled faintly. "Light only shines beautifully because there's darkness to hold it." His gaze softened. "Just like you. You only realize how bright you are when you finally believe you deserve to be." Clara froze, the words sinking into her heart like warmth after winter chill. Snow landed softly on her hair, melting against her flushed skin. For the first time in years, she didn't look away. She smiled, small, real, radiant. And in that fleeting moment, under the glow of his lights and the falling snow, Christmas in Everson finally felt like a miracle again. The days that followed were the brightest Everson had seen in years. The Christmas fair lingered, lights still wrapped around the trees, and the smell of cinnamon floated through the streets like a quiet hymn. Inside Winter Lights, Clara moved differently now, lighter, steadier. Lucas's presence had become part of her rhythm, like the hum of the coffee machine or the clink of cups. They didn't need many words anymore. Sometimes a glance across the counter said enough. But Christmas Eve came with its own kind of stillness, the kind that feels too perfect, too fragile, as if something beneath it was waiting to break. That morning, Lucas appeared with his usual quiet smile and something small in his hand. It was wrapped in brown paper and tied with a thin silver ribbon. Clara blinked. "What's this?" "A gift," he said simply. "I didn't get you anything," she admitted. "You already did," he replied. "You reminded me what light feels like." His voice was soft, too soft. And before she could respond, he placed the package on the counter. Clara untied the ribbon carefully, as though afraid to ruin it. Inside was a tiny silver bell, no bigger than her thumb, polished until it gleamed. "It's beautiful," she whispered, holding it up so it caught the glow of the cafe lights. Lucas nodded. "If you ever get lost in the snow," he said, "ring it. I'll find you." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. The way he said it wasn't playful. It was solemn, almost like a promise carved from something deeper. "Lucas," she began, but he shook his head with a faint smile. "Don't look for meaning where there doesn't need to be one," he said gently. "Just keep it close." She smiled anyway, because that was all she could do. "Then I'll hang it here," she said, reaching up to tie the bell to the doorframe of Winter Lights. It chimed softly as it swayed, a clear, pure sound that seemed to linger in the air. When Lucas heard it, he smiled. Not with his lips, but with his eyes. That evening, the cafe glowed warmer than ever. Candles flickered on every table, and laughter drifted out the door. Mia was there, helping Clara serve cocoa to the late-night visitors who wanted one last taste of Christmas before heading home. Lucas sat by the window, watching the snowfall thicken outside. He looked calm, but his fingers tapped restlessly against his mug. "You all right?" Clara asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He nodded slowly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "The past," he said. Then after a pause, "And the parts of it that never really leave." She wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression told her not to push. So she just sat there, watching the snow drift between the lights. When the last customers left and Mia waved goodnight, the cafe fell quiet again. Clara began clearing tables, humming under her breath. Lucas stood, slipped on his coat, and walked toward the door. "Heading out already?" she asked, a note of disappointment she didn't mean to reveal. He hesitated. "Just some air. I'll be back soon." The bell above the door chimed as he left, that soft silver note echoing longer than usual. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Clara glanced at the clock, her hand frozen mid-wipe. Through the foggy glass, she saw movement near the alley behind the cafe. A shadow, tall and hurried. Her heartbeat quickened. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside. The cold bit instantly at her cheeks, the sound of snow crunching beneath her boots. Around the corner, 2 figures stood beneath a dim street lamp. One was Lucas, the other, a man in a dark coat she didn't recognize. She stopped, hidden behind the edge of the wall, barely daring to breathe. "They've found out about me," she heard Lucas say, his voice low but clear. "You need to go, now." The stranger's tone was urgent. "You shouldn't have come back here, Lucas. It's not safe. Not for you, not for anyone close to you." "I had to," Lucas answered quietly. "There was something I needed to see one last time." There was a long silence, broken only by the wind. Then the man said, "You don't have much time." "They'll be here by morning." Clara's stomach turned cold. "They? Who was he talking about?" Lucas stepped back, his face hidden in the shadows. Then I'd better disappear before the lights go out. And with that, he turned and walked away, not toward the street, but deeper into the snowfall, his figure fading between flakes of white until he was gone. Clara's breath trembled. Her eyes stung, though she didn't understand why. She waited there until the stranger vanished too, then slowly walked back inside, her mind spinning with questions. The cafe was empty now. The candles had burned low. The only sound left was the faint ringing of the silver bell hanging by the door, moving gently with the wind that followed him out. She reached up and touched it. It was cold, almost painfully so. "Where did you go, Lucas?" she whispered. No answer. Only the soft chime of the bell, a lonely echo in the silence. And for the first time since Christmas began, winter lights felt colder than the snow outside. The truth in the night. The morning after Lucas vanished, Everson woke under a sky of dull gray. The town that had glowed so brightly a day before now felt muted, as if even the snow had lost its light. Inside winter lights, Clara stood behind the counter, absently polishing the same mug over and over. The cafe was quiet, too quiet, the air heavy with something she couldn't name. Mia burst in, holding a newspaper, her expression tight. "Clara, you need to see this." Clara frowned, wiping her hands and taking the paper. Across the front page, bold black letters screamed, "Investment firm under federal investigation for money laundering, lead engineer missing." Below the headline was a grainy photograph, blurred, taken from a security feed, of a man walking away from a building at night. He wore a long dark coat, snow falling around him. The caption read, "Lucas Hale, former systems engineer, wanted for questioning." The mug slipped from Clara's hands, shattering against the floor. Mia knelt to help, her voice shaking. "Isn't that him?" Clara couldn't speak. Her eyes were fixed on the paper, her heart pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. Lucas, the man who fixed her lights, who laughed at her clumsy skating, who gave her the silver bell, was now missing. "Possibly hunted. No," she whispered. "It can't be." Mia's face softened. "Clara, maybe you should—" But Clara was already backing away, shaking her head. "He's not like that. He's not." Her voice cracked on the last word. The cafe suddenly felt colder than ever, and outside the snow began to fall again, thick and silent, like the sky itself was mourning. The day dragged on. Customers came and went, their chatter distant, meaningless. Clara could barely focus. Every sound, every car outside, every bell chime, made her heart jump, hoping it was him. By nightfall, she couldn't take it anymore. She closed early, turned off the main lights, and sat in the dark with only the fireplace burning. Shadows danced across the wooden floor, and the silver bell by the door glimmered faintly in the flicker. That was when she heard it. A knock, soft but deliberate. Her breath caught. She stood, every nerve alert. Another knock. She crossed the room slowly and opened the door. Lucas stood there. His coat was dusted with snow, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. He looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Lucas," she whispered, "can I come in?" His voice was low, rough. She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered quietly, the silver bell chiming as the door closed behind him. The sound seemed almost too pure for the tension filling the air. He turned toward the fireplace, holding his hands out to the warmth. "You saw the news." It wasn't a question. Clara's voice trembled. "They said you're missing, that you're wanted for crimes I didn't commit." He finished for her, turning to face her. "But yes, that's me in the photo." She stared at him, torn between fear and the ache of wanting to believe. "Then tell me the truth, Lucas. Who are you?" He took a long breath, then said quietly, "I worked for them, the firm they're investigating. I designed the light systems they use to hide their money transfers, coded through city grids. I didn't know what it was at first. But when I found out..." He stopped, his eyes unfocused, remembering. "I reported it. I thought doing the right thing would fix everything. But instead, they turned on me. They made me the scapegoat. Then you ran. I ran because I had proof. Files, recordings, data they couldn't erase. I sent most of it to a federal contact. But there's one last piece, the key, hidden here in Everson. That's why I came back. Clara's breath hitched. So the people who were looking for you weren't police, he said grimly. They were hired to make sure I never talk again. The room fell silent, except for the crackle of the fire. The light painted his face in gold and shadow, the kind of light that revealed truth whether you wanted it or not. Clara stepped closer, her hands trembling. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have been safer not knowing. Do you really think I care about being safe now? Her voice broke. You should have trusted me. He looked at her then, really looked. The kind of gaze that carries both apology and longing. I did. That's why I came back tonight. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream at him for lying, for disappearing, for breaking the fragile peace she'd finally found. But instead, all she could do was whisper, You're still leaving, aren't you? I have to, he said. Once I deliver what's left of the evidence, I'll disappear for good. If they find me here, she cut him off, shaking her head. No, you can't keep running. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do, she said fiercely, stepping closer. You told me once that light only shines because of the dark, so stop hiding from it. His expression faltered, the faintest crack in his calm. She reached out, her voice softening. If you believe in the light, then let me help you carry it. You don't have to do this alone. For a moment, neither moved. The fire popped, the snow outside whispered against the glass, and between them hung the heavy silence of a choice. Lucas's jaw tightened, his eyes glimmering with something raw and unguarded. Clara, you don't understand what this could cost you. I do, she said, and I'm still here. He closed his eyes, the weight of her words sinking deep. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled, the sound of a man torn between survival and love. You shouldn't have to pay for my mistakes. She took another step, until the firelight touched both their faces. Maybe not, but you taught me something. Light doesn't ask permission to shine. For the first time that night, Lucas smiled, faint, bittersweet, and real. You're impossible. Then you're stuck with me. He laughed quietly, a single broken sound, then exhaled, nodding. All right, he whispered. Together then. The tension dissolved, replaced by something fragile but powerful. Hope. Outside, the snow fell heavier, blanketing the world in silence. As they stood before the fire, the silver bell by the door swayed in the wind again, letting out a single, clear chime, the sound of a promise reborn in the dark. Between fire and snow, the night of Christmas Eve arrived like a dream, the kind that feels too beautiful to last. All of Everson gathered in the town square, wrapped in scarves and laughter, waiting for the fireworks to bloom over the frozen sky. From the window of winter lights, Clara could see the glow of lanterns flickering down the street. The cafe shimmered with warmth, candles burning low, pine garlands strung across the shelves, and the soft crackle of a record player spinning, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Lucas sat across from her at the corner table, his face lit by the dancing firelight. Between them, 2 plates of dinner waited, untouched for now. He looked calmer tonight, though the faint shadow under his eyes told another story. For a moment, it felt like the world outside had stopped chasing them. Clara smiled gently. You actually cooked, she teased. Lucas shrugged. A man can't run on coffee forever. The corner of her lips curved upward. You're learning. And you're smiling, he said softly. I'll take that as progress. For a while, they simply sat there. The song filling the quiet, the golden light wrapping around them. Then Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, steady, grounding her in a world that felt like it could fall apart at any second. Clara, he said quietly, I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but tonight, right here, this feels like home. Her eyes softened. You found it again, then? He nodded slowly. Thanks to you. A pause. Then, almost a whisper. Thank you for making me believe in Christmas again. She squeezed his hand. Then promise me something. That when this is all over, you'll stop running. We'll start over, somewhere no one knows us. Lucas smiled faintly, eyes glimmering in the candlelight. Somewhere warm, she laughed. Anywhere but here. For the first time, the future didn't seem impossible. Outside, the town's clock tower struck 9. The first firework burst into the sky, red, then gold, then blue, scattering light across the snow-covered roofs. Clara leaned closer to the window, her reflection glowing against the glass. They've started, she said. Lucas stood behind her, his breath visible in the cold air leaking through the frame. Beautiful, he murmured. But his tone wasn't about the fireworks. It was about her. She turned, catching the look in his eyes, that mix of peace and sorrow, like a man memorizing what he knows he can't keep. Then, before she could speak, the door burst open. The bell above it screamed a warning, a sharp, broken chime. 3 men in dark coats stormed inside, snow clinging to their boots. The leader's voice cut through the music. Lucas Hale, you're coming with us. Everything froze. Lucas's eyes flicked to Clara, calm but fierce. Get behind me, the men advanced. Clara stumbled back as one of them drew a weapon. The record skipped. The music faltered. Firelight trembled across the walls. Lucas moved fast, too fast for her to process. He grabbed a chair, swung it toward the nearest man. Glass shattered as a shot went off, hitting a shelf behind the counter. Lucas! Clara screamed. Go! He shouted, catching her wrist and pushing her toward the back door. Go now. I'm not leaving you! Yes, you are. His voice cracked, not from fear but from the unbearable weight of what had to be done. Run, Clara. She hesitated only a heartbeat before another gunshot shattered the front window. The cafe lights flickered wildly, plunging the room in flashes of shadow and flame. Lucas turned, blocking the men's path. His voice was steady, defiant. You'll have to shoot me before I hand over anything. Then so be it, one of them snarled. Clara's scream cut through the chaos as Lucas grabbed the man's arm, twisting it, sending the gun clattering across the floor. Another punch landed, another flash of movement, glass raining like ice around them. But there were too many. Lucas turned once more toward her, his eyes desperate but gentle. Clara! She froze at the back door, snowlight pouring in from the alley. He took one breath, one last moment to memorize her face. Then, quietly, almost tenderly, he said, Live, and never stop believing. The words hit her harder than any bullet could. Then the sound came, deafening, final. A single shot echoed through winter lights. The lights flickered. The record went silent. Clara fell to her knees, her hands trembling as the air filled with smoke and the metallic scent of blood. Lucas! She cried, but there was no answer. Outside, distant sirens began to wail. Police, too late. The men scattered, vanishing into the snow as flashing lights painted the windows red and blue. Clara stumbled forward, heart racing, her eyes searching through the haze. The tables were overturned, the glass glittered like frost, and there, near the door, the faint glint of silver. She knelt down. The little silver bell lay half-buried in snow blown through the broken glass. A dark smear of blood streaked across its side. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. It was cold, achingly cold. When she lifted it, it rang once, a soft, fragile sound that seemed to echo into forever. Tears blurred her vision. Outside, fireworks continued to bloom across the sky, painting the snow with bursts of color, red, gold, blue, the same lights Lucas had designed, still burning, still alive, and in their glow, Clara whispered through her tears, You said you'd find me in the snow. Then come back, please. The silver bell rang again faintly, as if answering. But the cafe was silent. Only the snow kept falling, and the lights kept shining, refusing to go dark, as though the town itself remembered the man who once brought light to it all. When the snow stopped falling. The snow had finally stopped. A year had passed since that night. The night winter lights burned in Clara's memory like the last candle in a storm. Everson had changed little. The same cobblestone streets, the same strings of lights, the same gentle hum of life moving on. But the cafe at the corner of Elm Street was no longer Winter Lights. The new sign above the door read, Silver Bell Cafe. Inside, the air was warm and golden. The scent of vanilla and roasted coffee filled the room, mingling with soft Christmas music that drifted like a lullaby. Clara stood behind the counter, her hair tied loosely, her smile calm but distant, the kind of smile born from grief that had learned how to breathe again. On the doorframe, just above eye level, hung a small silver bell, the same one. It chimed gently every time someone entered, its tone clear, fragile, and full of memory. People often asked her about it. "Is there a story behind the name?" they'd say, and Clara would smile, her eyes reflecting the glow of the cafe lights. "There is," she'd answer softly, "but it's not finished yet." Outside, snowflakes still lined the streets, though the storm had long passed. The townspeople came and went, leaving footprints that melted quickly in the slush. Christmas was quieter this year, softer, humbler, but no less beautiful. Mia had moved to another city, yet she still sent postcards that read, "You'd be proud of me. I still believe in magic." Clara kept every one of them in a drawer behind the counter, and though no one said his name anymore, Lucas was still everywhere. In the lights that lined the rooftops, in the hum of electricity that made the cafe glow each night. Sometimes, when she stayed late cleaning, she swore she could feel him there, not haunting her, but watching, like the light itself refused to fade. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the snow-covered rooftops, the bell above the door rang again. Clara looked up automatically, expecting one of her regulars. But instead, a small girl stood there, no older than 8 or 9, wrapped in a red coat and holding a tiny package. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes bright and curious. "Are you Miss Clara?" the girl asked. Clara blinked, surprised. "Yes, that's me." The girl smiled shyly and held out the package. "This is for you. A man told me to give it to you today." Clara's breath caught. "A man?" The girl nodded. "He said you'd understand." Then, without another word, she waved and darted back into the falling snow before Clara could even ask her name. Clara stood there for a moment, frozen. Her hands trembled as she untied the small ribbon around the box. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, was a snow globe. Simple, delicate. Inside it, 2 tiny figures stood beneath a lamppost, holding hands while snow swirled around them, her vision blurred. She lifted it carefully, turning it over once. The flakes shimmered like stars as they fell inside the glass. Something else lay at the bottom of the box, a folded piece of paper. Clara set the globe down and unfolded the note. The handwriting was unmistakable, strong, neat, familiar. "I found the light, thanks to you. L." Her hand covered her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. For a long moment she couldn't move. The cafe around her faded. All she could see was the soft swirl of snow outside, the reflection of the silver bell above the door, and the flicker of the lights he once designed. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice breaking on his name. The bell chimed softly as the wind passed through the doorframe, a sound so gentle it felt alive. Clara closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. But this time she smiled through it. A small, peaceful smile, because for the first time, she didn't feel his absence as pain. She felt it as light. She placed the snow globe by the window, where it caught the glow of the cafe lamps. Outside, the street was quiet again. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the square, and far above, a single star shone through the thinning clouds. Clara leaned on the counter, watching the reflection of the lights in the glass. Her cafe's lights, his lights. and the silver bell above her head shimmered once more. It rang, just once. Pure, soft, perfect. Clara looked up and whispered, "Merry Christmas?" "Lucas." The snow outside began to fall again, slow, calm, like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. And for the first time in a long, long while, Winter Lights, now Silver Bell, truly lived up to its name. The Christmas Miracle. The snow had returned to Everson, heavier than it had been in years. Flakes fell slow and endless, soft enough to blur the edges of the world. The town glowed beneath layers of white, rooftops glistening, lampposts crowned with frost, and laughter drifting faintly from the square where the fireworks would soon begin. From the front window of the Silver Bell Café, Clara watched the snow dance. The night was still, the streets nearly empty. Inside, the café flickered with golden light, the scent of cinnamon and coffee wrapping around her like a familiar embrace. It was Christmas Eve again, 1 year since the letter. 1 year since she'd last seen him. She wiped the counter absently, her gaze drifting toward the little silver bell above the door. It chimed whenever the wind passed, a soft sound, part memory, part heartbeat. Clara smiled faintly. "You'd laugh at me," she whispered, still waiting by the window like this. Her reflection in the glass smiled back, and for a moment she almost believed he could see her. Outside, the town's clock struck 9. From somewhere distant came the muffled cheer of people gathering for the fireworks show, the same one Lucas had designed years ago. The same lights that had once painted the snow in gold and crimson. Clara wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. The cold met her gently, the kind of chill that reminded her she was still alive. She stood under the awning, watching the snow fall across the quiet street. The world shimmered, every light a reminder, every sound a memory. Then, through the haze of snow, she saw a figure, a man standing at the far end of the street, tall, in a long, dark coat. His head was tilted slightly, as if he too were listening to the silence. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. "Lucas," she breathed. The name left her lips before she could think. The man turned, slowly, and even from that distance she could see it. The familiar curve of his smile, faint but real, the same warmth that once melted winter itself. Her heart stumbled. She took a step forward, then another, her boots crunching softly through the snow. "Lucas!" she called again, louder this time. But as the wind swept through the street, the snow thickened, swirling between them like a curtain. She blinked, wiped her eyes. And when she looked again, the spot where he'd stood was empty. The only thing left was the soft echo of footsteps fading into the storm. Clara stopped, breathless. The street was still ghostly. Her eyes darted to a nearby bench beneath the lamplight. There, draped across it, was a scarf, a familiar one. Gray wool, frayed at the ends. She lifted it slowly, her hands trembling. The fabric was still warm, faintly scented with pine, and something she couldn't quite name. Something that felt like him. Her throat tightened. "Lucas," she whispered again, as if saying his name might pull him back from the snow. But only the silence answered. That, and the soft ringing of the bell above her door, carried faintly on the wind. She turned, the scarf pressed against her chest, and in that moment, the first firework exploded across the sky. Light spilled over the rooftops, red, gold, silver, shimmering against the falling snow. Each burst reflected in her eyes like 1,000 tiny miracles, one after another. And then, faintly, the silver bell chimed again, not from the wind this time, but clear and deliberate, as though someone had rung it. Clara froze, her heart pounding. She looked around. The street was empty, yet she smiled, tears filling her eyes. "Maybe," she whispered to the night. "That's enough." The fireworks continued, each one brighter than the last, the colors bleeding into the snow until the whole sky burned with light. Clara stood there, her scarf wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her face lit by the fireworks' glow, and in her heart, something shifted, not the sharp ache of loss, but a quiet peace, because maybe miracles weren't about someone coming back. Maybe they were about the love that never truly left. Her voice trembled, soft but certain. Perhaps the miracle isn't in who returns, but in a heart that stays warm enough to wait. The fireworks reached their peak, filling the heavens with light. Snowflakes shimmered like falling stars. Clara tilted her head up, eyes glistening, a small, grateful smile forming on her lips. "Merry Christmas," she whispered. "Wherever you are." And as the final burst of gold lit the sky, the silver bell chimed one last time, clear, bright, eternal. The sound lingered long after the lights faded. The snow, at last, began to slow, and somewhere, maybe close, maybe far, a man in a dark coat turned one last time toward the glow of a little cafe, smiled softly, and disappeared into the quiet, endless white. The Christmas light. The fireworks had faded. The snow had stopped, and in the quiet that followed, Everson seemed to breathe again. Through the window of the Silver Bell Cafe, the light still glowed, gentle, golden, alive. Clara sat by the counter, hands wrapped around a cup of cocoa, watching the last flakes drift past the glass. The scarf lay folded beside her, and the silver bell swayed lightly in the doorframe, chiming once as if whispering goodnight. It had been another Christmas, her second without him. Yet the ache in her heart no longer felt like loss. It felt like light, because she finally understood. Miracles weren't always about people coming back. Sometimes, they were about learning to carry their love forward, to keep it alive, even in silence. Outside, the world shimmered with quiet peace. Children laughed somewhere down the street. A couple walked past hand in hand. Life went on, and so did love, in its quiet, unassuming way. Clara smiled softly and whispered, "Some people only stay for one winter, but they leave a warmth that lasts forever." The bell chimed again, clear and gentle. She looked up as if hearing an answer in its sound. Maybe she did. She stood, turned off the last light, and stepped outside. The sky was dark but not empty. Tiny stars glistened above the rooftops, each one a small reminder of everything that still shone, even after darkness. As she locked the door, she whispered one last time, "Merry Christmas, Lucas, wherever you are. Thank you for the light." The wind carried her words away, soft as a prayer. And for a fleeting moment, as she turned down the street, the silver bell rang one final time, faint, tender, eternal. Because Christmas was never just a season of joy. It was a season of forgiveness, of love that lingers, of small miracles shared between hearts brave enough to believe.